Hello, I'm James Harness, Chief Sales Officer for Insurance Management Group. Looking forward to talking to you guys today. Spent the last 10 years in the transportation industry as a supplier of parts to aftermarket manufacturers and trailer refurb centers. Multi-year member of the National Trailer Dealers Association, currently hold a position of Vice Chairman of the Associates for the Truck Trailer Manufacturers Association. I hold relationships first and foremost over everything, and to make a change a year and a half ago to come to a different industry, which is the insurance, part of my desire was to stay within this transportation industry, and fortunately the higher beings, owners of the company, have allowed me to stay within the industry. And just being around people like you, obviously, you know, it's such a large industry, but it's so close-knit, like a family. It's something I cherish and something that I didn't want to let go of. So I'm very pleased and happy to be still a part of the transportation industry. The whole reason coming to IMG was the culture. There was opportunities where I was selling something, you know, as a vendor, and coming into this industry with all the friends of other vendors and relationships I've made gave me an opportunity to, I mean, everybody needs insurance. It's not something we all like to talk about, but we all need it. So first and foremost, it's 100% relationship based, and just grateful that have an opportunity to continue some of those relationships with a lot of you. Number one, probably just the availability. You can call me. I dare people to call me at 6:30 a.m. on a Saturday morning because I'm going to answer. 100% relationships first. It's hard in the sales industry, whether it be insurance or any type of sales, to gain that loyalty, trust, and over the years, being with a lot of you, that, you know, you're able to experience the genuineness. So first and foremost, I align 100% with IMG because this culture is all about relationships, accountability, being genuine, and delivering wow at every point in time we have an opportunity. Always enjoy the journey. 100% always enjoy the journey.
Thanks, James. My name's Trent Diller, and I'm an agency principal with Insurance Management Group. I've been in the industry for over 15 years, and like James, I've recently joined the IMG team 2 years ago. The reason for joining the IMG team was just the culture that they brought, the CEO that we met with initially, just the feeling I got from him, the family feel that we were looking for, the small business feel, but yet the big business presence. And what I mean by that is, you know, being an independent agent, we represent over 50 carriers and have accounts and customers across the nation that we handle. And that small feel, though, still feeling like family was what we were looking for. I had the privilege of joining James last year at the NTDA convention and meeting a lot of you folks. And you could just tell from day one, from the leadership as well as all you as members, just that camaraderie, the relationships that existed within the NTDA. And it was just a privilege and an honor to be part of that. Obviously, this year we're doing it virtually, which is a little bit different. It'd be nice to see all your faces again and talk a little bit more about insurance and what we can bring to the table. But I think today in our presentation, you're going to see, in an industry specific, when we talk about cyber liability, a lot of the things that are going on, what a lot of us consider as the new form of domestic and international terrorism. That's changing every day. A lot of people are unwilling to talk about it. A lot of agents are unwilling to talk about it just because they don't have the knowledge. And again, it is an evolving product. But we feel like it's an important thing to all of you, especially in this transportation industry. No matter what you're doing, we all have exposures, whether it's employee emails, whether it's you as the owner of the company, the emails you're going out working with vendors. there's exposures there that we need to talk about and that we need to present to you. What we believe we do here at IMG is offer you a unique experience. We don't come in and we don't offer just the same coverages that you have. We sit down, we assess your risk, we speak with you, we speak with employees and other people in your business to assess and understand what your business needs and the products that we need to offer you. Your business is unique, every business is unique, no one is alike, and we understand that, and that's why we know we have to offer you a customizable and a customized product. And we do that through the IMG Edge. At IMG, we believe in people over profit.
Come enjoy the journey with us.
Welcome to the family. My name is Trent Diller, and I'm an executive producer with Insurance Management Group. Our Chief Sales Officer, James Harness, and myself would like to welcome all of you to the 2020 NTDA virtual convention and to the cyber liability presentation that's being offered by Insurance Management Group, partnered with Risk Placement Services. As we all know, the insurance industry is an ever-evolving business. Every year seems to provide new exposures and risk for your business. And the latest hot topic in the industry has been cyber liability and the impact it's having on businesses like yours. Cyber criminals are becoming more and more sophisticated. As we go through the presentation today, you'll see some of the things that are happening here across the globe. They're more sophisticated in the techniques they're using to hack your business and your business's information. We'll be talking today about the different types of coverages that cyber liability policies cover, as well as some areas where you might be exposed as a business. Real quick, I want to read a few stats before I turn it over to James to introduce today's speaker. Just a few stats to give you before the presentation. The big one, the average hacker spends up to 275 days in your system before making a move, just monitoring your keystrokes, monitoring what you're doing within your system. 61% of businesses who had a breach went out of business within 6 months. So the cost to mitigate these risks and these losses is pretty substantial. With the adoption of 5G in 2019, there were 8.5 billion devices that were connected, and they project that number in 2025 to get all the way up to 50 billion. And as you guys are all aware, as we go through all this work from home, becoming kind of more business as usual for a lot of businesses like yourself, it opens up that risk of employee exposure through email and some other things like we'll talk about today. So appreciate you guys being on. I want to turn it over to James Harness, our Chief Sales Officer here at Insurance Management Group, to introduce the speaker today.
Hello, NTDA. This is James Harness, Chief Sales Officer for Insurance Management Group. Really miss being on site and with you all in California. But we're still able to bring you some information, and I get the pleasure of introducing our partner in the cyber insurance space, Nick Carrazza. He's with Risk Placement Services. He'll be presenting with us today. Nick has 10 years of experience, insurance experience, focusing on executive liability type risks on the brokerage side of insurance. Nick spent 3 months early on in his career with Lloyd's of London with different Lloyd's syndicates, and has a national expertise in this cyberspace. He was also recently awarded the Up-and-Coming Broker of the Year for 2020. Huge national exposure there. With his energy, enthusiasm, and knowledge of insurance products, makes him an exceptional resource for all of us agents that he does business with. Natural-born leader, and he's known to maintain positive relationships with the organization, has the insight, talent to maintain his principles and get buy-in from his clients. Along with cyber insurance, Nick loves playing golf. I love that part about Nick. And listening to live music, spend time with family and friends. So please welcome Nick Carrazza with Risk Placement Services.
So again, questions to think on. Who would you call when a breach occurred? Do you have access to an IT firm that can handle a breach? What would happen if you didn't have access to your system for 2 weeks? What would happen? We're seeing the average data breach will shut down a client for 14 days. That's going to include possible loss of customers, loss of business income, a hit to your reputation. Again, these are all things that a full comprehensive cyber policy are going to trigger and help you with when an event occurs. And then finally, does your team feel confident that you could coordinate a response to a cyber event internally. I sit through cyber claims probably 5 to 10 a week. There is no training out there that can fully prepare you for what happens when a cyber event occurs. A cyber policy, again, protects you as well as gives you some peace of mind that if and when it occurs, all you're doing is making a simple phone call. I'm going to talk about a few statistics as well that I find pretty staggering. The transportation industry, they're ranked third among the industries targeted for a cyber attack, only behind financial services and retail. The average cost for a cyber breach without insurance in the transportation sector is $3.7 million. I know that sounds a lot, and the reason that is so high is because the high payment for ransomware, which I'm going to talk about in a later slide, as well as loss of income. So whether it be loss of customer churn or loss of customer or loss of income because you can't operate efficiently for, let's say, 2 to 3 weeks. Some staggering statistics when it comes to ransomware. So in 2018, the average ransom payment was only $29,000. 2019, $300,000. And 2020, our statistics internally, we're paying an average of about $502,000 to hackers who were locking our clients out of the systems. So again, ransomware is on the rise, and I'm going to talk more about that later, but that is usually employee driven. It's the employee who's making the mistake, not so much the error within your internal IT systems. So claims, ransomware, again, what that is that's targeted malware that's attacking certain systems. What usually happens is it's baiting an employee to click a link or open an attachment. When they're doing one of those two, it's opening the door to your network. So again, you've done all you could as an insured, but because the employee made an error, it's giving the hacker access to the network, and then they're locking down your systems. So they're saying, knowing is operating, we're locking you out until you pay X in Bitcoin. We're seeing ransom on the rise. The main reason for this is hackers are getting paid. Like I said, we're seeing about $500,000 in Bitcoin payment. It's nonstop. And we're seeing a lot of insureds don't have strong backup. So a question to take to your IT team after this conference is, hey, how often are we backing up our data? Is it stored off-site? Is it encrypted? Things like that. Social engineering, funds transfer, and telecom fraud. I'm going to be talking about what these are in later slides, but this is going to be release of your funds. So someone baiting you to send funds, someone requesting your financial institution to send your funds to a hacked bank account. And there is no industry that's safe right now. We're seeing an uptick in claims for manufacturers, construction, transportation type risk, where 4 or 5 years ago, these would never be touched. So we're really, the cyber industry as a whole has changed in regards to everyone is a threat and at risk, and it wasn't like that 4 or 5 years prior. I'm going to give you 3 claim examples that I've sat through on my book of business alone when it comes to trucking. This is a food trucking company. They suffered a ransomware attack. Cyber criminals encrypted all of their data files. They requested a ransom of $8,600 in exchange for a decryption key. So again, what these hackers are doing is they're locking you out of your network. So you don't have access to your programs, your files, your bank accounts, etc., until you pay that Bitcoin or pay those funds, and they give you the key to unlock it. Like modern companies, this firm was run entirely on systems. They had their routes, logistical information, key contacts, and how much stock they needed per order. They also shut down their payment card processing capabilities. The business came to a complete halt. The CEO refused to give in and pay the demand. Instead, the company immediately set up processes to rebuild that data. They rebuilt that data from paper copies and employees' knowledge on day-to-day operations, which resulted in a large amount of overtime cost right away. What was worse, however, was the loss of business income that resulted from the extended outage. They were down for 22 days. So they lost customers, they lost business income, etc. For the time that they were down, the insured realized that they lost about $900,000 in revenue. They filed a claim. After the adjustment, they recovered about $875,000 of the full $900,000 payout. So this cyber claim triggered your business income loss. It paid the ransom and brought in the IT forensics team to figure out what happened, why it happened, what information was taken, and building your systems back from scratch. So great example of how this small firm could have been out $900,000, but a properly written cyber coverage did pay for it, and the client was only out their deductible. So this is another claim that I stepped through. This is a haulage firm. They did about $45 million in annual revenue. They specialize in transport of heavy goods such as cars, machinery, and bulk liquids. The firm's finance director had been in touch with the firm's accounting about a tax liability bill from the previous quarter. They needed to pay a government agency about $178,000. The finance director, they arranged the first installment to be made to the tax collection agency. The finance director received an email stating that they are requesting funds to go to a different bank account. So the finance director, they called their bank. They said, hey, we need to send these funds to a different bank routing number, not the one that we initially said. The finance director corresponded with the accounting firm. They sent the 3 remaining payments to the new account, and they considered the matter closed. The accounting firm called the finance director and said, hey, we never got the rest of your payments. It turned out that a hacker got into our insureds, the heavy transport risk, email and pretended to be the accounting firm. So they emailed the finance director saying, we've changed our routing information. Please send these payments to the below routing number. In good faith, the finance director did that, and it turns out that it was a spoofed email. So what these hackers are doing is they're getting into an insured's network or into your network, and they're watching who you email, what you email, when you're making payments. So this hacker saw that this third-party CPA was needing funds. They knew it was going to be paid soon, so they creating an email pretending to be the third-party CPA to trick the CFO. This did trigger the policy. There's a sublimit of about $250,000 for these types of claims, and they were able to recoup almost all of it. So again, great example of how someone wasn't hacked. It wasn't a network hacked or personal identifiable information hacked. It was someone pretending to be a third party tricking your insured. So a great example of how this policy is much broader than I think the day-to-day small business thinks. Last claim that I like to talk about, this is one that I recently sat through. A trucker was in Indiana. They stopped at a gas station to stay the night, fill up, and get some rest. While at the gas station, the trucker logged into the gas station's Wi-Fi. The Wi-Fi was unencrypted. What that means, there was no password to access the Wi-Fi network, which means it's very insecure. Hacker gained access to the onboard computer, which then gave them access to the headquarters network. The hacker shut down the entity entirely, which was worse because they actually rerouted some of the trucks to different locations. There was about a $500,000 ransom paid, and then there was a loss of business income of about $2 million. This insured had a $5 million cyber policy, and it was almost a full policy limit loss after forensic costs, legal fines and penalties, things like that. So this is a great example of how this trucker in good faith was just doing what he was supposed to do, logged into an unprotected Wi-Fi, and the hacker got access because they hacked into the gas station and then hacked into the onboard computer. So 3 really great claims, all a little bit different on how, a cyber policy can trigger to help you at your time of need. A few claim takeaways here. Cyber criminals are skillful. I would say 5 or 6 years ago when I first started in this, our forensics teams were smarter than the hackers. That's not the case anymore. Especially when you turn on the news, you have Fortune 500 companies getting breached, you have the government getting breached. Cyber criminals are just attacking constantly. They're getting paid now. They know that if they can get in and they can lock you out, chances are you, a business owner, is going to pay because you can't afford to be out 7+ days, or your carrier is going to pay. And then finally, human error plays a major role in most cyber losses. I would say about 70 to 80% of the cyber claims that I sit through on a weekly basis are due an employee clicking a link, open attachment, or sending funds to an untrusted third party. And again, almost all modern businesses have some form of cyber exposure. So again, just things to take away from those 3 claims. This is a pretty funny slide that I like to put. It's pretty old, but the Wall Street Journal forever ago put it. And it's just, you have human error on one side of the ring. And, it's just saying in this corner, we have firewalls, encryption, antivirus software, the best forensics money can buy. And this corner, we have Dave. Dave's the one who's making the mistake that's giving the hacker access to your network. I'll stop for a second to see if there's any questions. Trent, do we have any, or are we good?
Good at this time.
Awesome. Well, now I'm going to dig into a cyber policy, kind of talk a little bit about what the coverages are. Again, there's two different types of policies. You're going to have your monoline cyber policy, which has all your nuts and bolts. It's kind of like your Mercedes or your Lexus. And then you have cyber endorsements that are just little throw-ins on your general liability policies. They're usually $250, and they're really just Band-Aid coverage. They're going to be your car with 500,000 miles without a windshield. I don't recommend them. I don't think the coverages are there. The policies that I'm going to be talking about are your full-blown cyber policies with all your bells and whistles. A way a cyber policy is built, you have three towers of insurance agreements. You're going to have your incident response coverage. You're going to have your first-party coverages. And then last but not least, your third-party coverages, which is going to be your, when people are coming back to sue you. I'm going to break all these down, but this is just real basic 30,000-foot overview of the structure of a cyber policy. So we'll start with first-party coverages first. The most important first-party coverages are going to be your incident response costs. So let's say one day you come into the office, you are locked out of your computer, you have no idea why. What do you do? On most policies, you're going to have access to a 24-hour hotline. You can call this hotline and you have access to your carrier's legal team. They're going to ask you questions. What happened? What's going on? Why is your computer looking weird? Tell us about it. From there, they're going to make the assessment. Is it worth bringing in the forensics team? Is it worth filing a claim? What are the next steps? So you as a policyholder, because you've spent this premium to buy this policy, all you need to do is put the carrier on notice, and everything is taken care of for you. So the first incident response cost worth talking about is legal and for first-party legal expense. So my example I brought in earlier, let's say you have clients in 13, 14, 20 states. Do you know the different state laws when it comes to notification? For example, the state of California usually have about 14 days to notify an infected individual that their information has been taken. For me, I'm in Kentucky. You have 30 days to notify. Indiana, it's as soon as reasonable possible. It doesn't give a state law, a state law. So it's kind of all over the place. When you're partying up with these first-party legal teams, this is all they do. So they're going to take care of all that notification for you. If you go against the state notification law, you're fined per day per record until that individual is properly notified. That's why so many small businesses do go out of business when they have a breach. It's these fines and penalties that they didn't even know they were breaking that puts a financial burden on them. You then have your forensics investigation costs. This is the IT team. They are going to be the top-notch firms. Most of them are based out of California. They're going to log in remotely to your system, and they're going to determine the origin, severity, and kind of duration of the breach. Figure out how long they've been in there, what files have they accessed, things like that. These firms charge anywhere between $12,000 to $15,000 an hour without insurance. With insurance, it's significantly cheaper because of the negotiated rates our carriers have with these firms. So again, I'm a big component. As much as you might love your small town IT firm, they might not always be fully equipped to handle, let's say, a ransomware event where you have to negotiate through the dark web with the hacker to get the ransom down to, let's say, $500,000, $200,000. This is all that they do. And then finally, a public relations team. They're going to come in and say, how do we help your brand? Are clients going to leave you? What type of message should we get out to these affected individuals that everything's okay and that you're doing what you need to do as a merchant or as a risk that to just affirm to your customers that you're taking care of them or taking care of the event. That's going to be your incident response cost. I would say this is makes up 50 to 60% of the payouts when a cyber claim occurs. I hit on this already, but again, this is your notification cost. Carriers handle it in two ways. They're either going to give you a monetary value of notification, or are they going to build you a policy where they're going to do an X amount of notified individuals? So let's say you have 5,000 customers, or you have 5,000 pieces of identifiable information on your servers. You can build it that way. That's going to cover things like your notification costs. It's also going to cover free credit monitoring to those affected individuals. I'm sure you have gotten notifications in the mail. I know I have, from a couple breaches where I could have signed up for free credit monitoring. And then finally, there are some carriers that will do voluntary notifications. So let's say you had a data breach, but it didn't trigger state law. So by law, you don't have to notify. But in good faith, you being a good client, you want to let your customers know. There are forms that will pick up voluntary notification just to make sure that your customers have an ease of mind, and you as a business owner have done what you needed to do to take care of your customers. This is one I feel like I've hit on a lot. It's the number one claim we're seeing. It's happening nonstop to all industries. No one's really safe. Cyber extortion or ransomware. Some forms call it extortion, some call it ransomware, but they pick up the same exact thing. So, if a hacker is sending malicious code to you and insured, like I said earlier, it's mostly in an email format, whether it be a link or an attachment. You open it and it locks you out of your system. We always suggest that this needs to be at full policy limits. This is a great example on those little BOP or those little cyber endorsements you might pay $200 for. It's usually sub-limited to $5,000 to $10,000, when the average ransomware payout right now is $500,000. So it's really important, in my opinion, to pair up with an agent that knows what they're doing when it comes to cyber liability. So when things do hit the fan, you're not underinsured. Again, full policy limits, and those terms go interchangeable: cyber extortion as well as ransomware. Business interruption and digital asset restoration. Business interruption is becoming more and more important as these ransomware claims are taking longer to settle out and longer to get the insured back up and running. So this is going to be reimbursement for lost earnings or expenses due to a security compromise. So let's say you're out 3 weeks due to the ransomware event, or you're out 3 weeks because the forensics team is trying to rebuild your network. Do you have the business income, or do you have the cash sitting there to get you through those 2 to 3 weeks? Chances are probably not. Not many smaller businesses do. So with the business income trigger, you're going to have coverage. This is specifically excluded from a GL ISO form. So the only place you can get BI coverage due to a computer event or to a security compromise is going to be your business income trigger on a cyber policy. And then you have digital asset and restoration. Again, a coverage that certain forms pick up, others are still leaving you hanging. Why this is important? Let's say this hacker destroyed your servers. So they destroyed all of your data and you can't restore it from the last backup. The forensics team will come in and try to help you rebuild that data to get you back up and running as soon as possible. If that's not picked up, the forensics team will just wipe their hands clean and say you're on your own, even though now you have access to none of the data that you need to operate. So digital asset restoration is essential. You usually see that at full policy limits as well. There's also a new coverage out there called bricking or computer hardware replacement cost. Those two coverages go hand in hand as well. We're seeing some cyber breaches being so severe, it's actually destroying or frying physical hardware. So let's say servers or technology on your truck, whatever it may be. Let's say the breach occurs and those devices are deemed inoperable. With bricking or computer hardware replacement costs, the carrier will come in and reimburse you for new equipment. This is a excluded peril on your property form. It's not going to pick up to reimburse you for physical equipment due to a cyber breach. So you want to make sure if you have a cyber coverage that those two are there. We're going to keep moving and talk a little bit more about business interruption, as there are some additional business interruption coverages worth discussing. Dependent business interruption. So if you're unable to operate due to a cyber event affecting, let's say, a cloud provider or a third party which you depend on to operate, if one of them have a data breach, our policy or your policy would trigger to reimburse you for business income loss. So let's say a third party, let's say your third party cloud provider shuts down and you don't have access to any of your information. Because of that, you can't operate sufficiently and you're down for a couple days. You didn't do anything wrong, but the third party that you rely on to operate had the breach. A correct written cyber policy would trigger to pay you for business income loss there. System failure and dependent system failure. This is becoming increasingly more important. Let's say your internal or third-party IT firm that you use is doing an upgrade to your system. Let's say during that upgrade, the upgrade fails and you're not back up and running by business start the next day. You're down for 3 or 4 days. There wasn't a hack. It was just a failure in your systems. Business income would trigger to reimburse you for loss of wages or earnings while down. So pretty slick because, you weren't hacked. It could just be a simple error. But the policy is there to help you. And then dependent system failure is going to be the same intent of dependent business interruption. But if that third party cloud provider just has a failure of their systems rather than a data breach or a hack, the policy would trigger to reimburse you for any business income loss there as well. So think system failure, just the best example in the claim that we see is upgrading your IT systems and it not going the way it's supposed to, and you're down for 3 or 4 days. Very, very important coverage. And then finally, you have non-IT system failure, dependent system failure. Let's say you have a non-IT business partner, let's say a credit card processor, supply chain partner, or someone that you rely on that isn't specifically an IT company. Same sort of trigger. Our intent is to reimburse you for business income loss there. So again, hopefully this really makes some sense on a cyber policy is much broader than just someone taking credit card data or somebody, stealing some information from your desk. The intent is really to protect you in all cases for a cyber event, not just the stereotypical someone hacked into your system. Third party, so you're back up and running, things are good to go, now you're getting sued. Privacy liability is going to be any type of personal identifiable information that was in your care, custody, and control. People can sue you for not storing that the correct way. So any type of legal costs, fines, penalties, and settlements, this will be picked up under the third-party liability insurance agreement. A carrier that I do a lot of business with, they're called CFC. They ran a report recently that said about 94% of their claims trigger first-party coverages, and only 6% trigger third-party coverages. The reason for that is people like you and I, we're not going to go sue your local bakery or local merchant for losing our data. The only people who make money there are the attorneys. But you do have coverage if and when someone does sue you. Network security liability, let's say your network's infected and you're emailing your customers. Let's say you're just passing that virus from your systems to your customers' systems and your customers get the virus. If they were to come sue you, it would, again, pick up legal defense and settlement costs within that situation. And then finally, media liability. This is becoming more and more important, especially in this day of age. Everyone is sue happy. This is going to be any type of defamation, libel, slander, copyright infringement on an insured's website or your social media page. So your LinkedIn, a blog that might be in your name. Let's say you create a new logo that looks just like another company's logo and they come to sue you. You're going to have coverage there. So it's very similar to your media liability insurance agreement and your GL form, but this is going to be in an online format rather than in hard copy. Some additional third-party liability triggers worth talking about: privacy regulatory liability. So there are hundreds and hundreds of regulatory bodies that are just trying to sue everyone for not storing personal identifiable information correctly. You have FINRA, you have HIPAA High Tech. I mean, the list goes on and on and on, and they're unregulated. So they can fine you whatever they seem reasonable and fair. Let's say you do get a fine, you don't want to pay it, the carrier doesn't want to pay it, they're going to go fight with you in court to make sure we get that thrown out. And I would say, I feel like every month there's a new regulatory body just being created and going after somebody. So this is really ease of mind that you're going to have defense costs, or let's say you do need to owe the fine or penalty, the carrier is going to pay that on your behalf. PCI fines and penalties. So what this is, it's the payment card industry. So in 2006, all your major credit card companies, American Express, Visa, Discover, MasterCard, they came together and they said any business that's processing payment cards must be PCI compliant. So if you aren't processing credit cards, but you're using a third-party payment card processor, I would reach out to them and make sure they're PCI compliant. Because if they're not PCI compliant and they have a breach, you're on the hook. What that means is they've created for the PCI board, they created 4 different levels of standards. It's based off the number of credit card transactions you take a year. What they say is you must, based on the number of transactions you take a year, you have to follow these 12 basic security requirements. If you have a breach of credit card information, they're going to do a PCI assessment on you. You have to pay for the PCI assessment, and if you fail the assessment, they can fine you fines and penalties for breaking those quote-unquote rules. So again, if you're not processing credit cards and you have a third party doing it for you, make sure you're reaching out to them to confirm that they are PCI compliant, or you're on the hook for that. Some miscellaneous coverages that are new bells and whistles that can be added to a policy form. You're going to have social engineering. This is a popular one if you haven't heard about it, or you might have been hit with it. This is going to be if a third party pretends to be somebody else. So let's say every Tuesday you pay XYZ some funds for a service done the month before. You get an invoice. It looks like it's from your contact. In good faith, you send those funds, and it turns out it was a fraudulent request. So those funds didn't go to John Smith. It went to the hacker. Social engineering's intent would be to reimburse you for those loss of funds. There's also some social engineering forms that pick up goods. So let's say you get a work order to transport X amount of goods to this location. In good faith, you do that, and it turns out it was a fraudulent request. There are forms out there that will reimburse you for the cost of goods, even though you didn't wire funds. So definitely take a look at that social engineering definition if you have it, and make sure it's broad enough and would cover the exposure that you need. Funds transfer coverage, this is going to be if someone hacks into your system, and let's say they get the username and password of your Wells Fargo or your corporate bank account, and they authorize the bank to wire your funds to a third-party bank account. It's probably a hacker's bank account. And you get up the next morning, you see that $100,000 was drawn out of your corporate bank account. The intent would be to reimburse you for those loss of funds. Computer crime, unauthorized entry of data into your computer system by someone other than you, causing money to be transferred. So we've seen people hack into accounts and just delete bank accounts. So they're like, hey, we don't need this one, we don't need this one, and then wire the funds manually rather than requesting the bank to do it. So it's just kind of making that funds transfer clause a bit broader. Telecom fraud, you'd be shocked how often this happens, but hackers will get into a phone system and rack up long distance charges. The intent there is just to reimburse you for those long distance bills. The newest cybercrime coverage out there right now is invoice manipulation or push payment fraud. Carriers call it that, or they'll call it phishing. The name, it might be 3 different names, but the intent's exactly the same. So let's say a hacker gets into your system, they create an invoice on your behalf, and they bill your customers. So again, you get hacked, the hacker creates an invoice that looks like it's coming from you, and they send it to the customers. And it's asking them to redirect funds rather than going to your bank account, but to the hacker's bank account. So the customer thinks they're paying you, the insured, but they're actually paying the hacker. The intent is to reimburse you for those loss of funds that you would have been receiving due to a data breach. So again, that's called invoice manipulation, push payment fraud, or phishing. A few closing thoughts. I know this was supposed to run 30 to 40 minutes, so I apologize for going a little long with those technical issues. Cyber risk is no longer just a data breach issue. It's a business continuity issue. Can your business afford not to purchase a cyber policy? Transportation firms are prime targets for modern cyber attacks because your industry pays the ransom. There's no way around it. The hackers are getting paid if and when they do get into a transportation risk network. If there's money to be made, a hacker's going to go after it. Both your business continuity and data systems will be at risk. Again, internally, do you have the tools and the knowledge to handle a cyber event internally. Again, when buying a cyber policy, you have access to all those vendors that the carriers have negotiated with. And then finally, cyber risk is not just an IT issue anymore. It really is a company issue. I have seen companies not purchase a cyber policy, have a cyber breach, and then there was a directors and officers suit for not taking care of the company appropriately or making decisions that negatively affected the company. So, just don't talk to your IT team about this. Talk about, all your board members or high-level officials. Explain to them, hey, this is what's going on. This is what we're seeing. The market as a whole right now is hardening. What that means is pricing's going up due to the volatility of claims. So if you don't have a cyber policy, now is really the time to dig into it, because I would say in 5 to 6 months, that price is probably going to go up 50%. And I think coverages are going to slowly pull back because of the claim volatility. And finally, can you afford not to have it? There's a staggering statistic I always like to share that it says 60% of small businesses at $50 million or lower who have a data breach without cyber insurance go out of business within 3 to 6 months after the breach occurs. And the reason for that is loss of business income. They spend way too much money on an IT team that has no business handling the event, and then fines and penalties. So again, can you afford, can you not afford a $4,000 or $5,000 policy, and then fight a $400,000 or $500,000 claim on your own? That's all that I have. Now Trent, I know we said we're going to do a few Q&A. I don't know if we have any questions, but if we do, we definitely can answer those.
Yeah, just a couple here. James has got one, and then feel free, those of you out there, to send any questions you have as well. So go ahead, James.
Nick, I got one. With the 36 million trucks on the road right now, all the telematics, smart hubs, wireless sensors reporting data back and forth to phones and companies' main systems. Can these be ways hackers can get into a system, and are there coverages for this?
Can you repeat the first part? You broke up that time. Sorry, James.
Sure. With all there in this trucking transportation industry, there's a lot of telematics now and smart hubs that are tied to trucks and trailers, wireless sensors that are reporting data back and forth to drivers' phones and companies' main computer systems. Can these be ways a hacker can get into systems, and are there coverages for this?
Sure. So a cyber policy, the intent would be to trigger if one of those, any type of technology device that those ones that you mentioned had a breach or was infected with a hacker, and let's say it caused any type of business income hiccup or any error in your operations, the intent of a cyber policy would be to trigger there. And I think the transportation industry as a whole, especially with driver logs, I'm seeing driver logs getting hacked and manipulated constantly. Yes, it's making it easier on the industry, but it's making it easier for a hacker to disrupt the industry. So to answer your question, James, yes, a cyber policy would help you there. That's the intent of it. Now's the time to buy.
Another one here, Nick. Does a cyber policy pick up cryptocurrency in regards to paying a ransom?
Yeah, that's a good question. So there are some forms, especially on your small cyber endorsements on your GL form, that aren't going to pick up a cryptocurrency. So why is that bad? No hacker is going to say, here's my banking information, government, please wire me money. They're going to take it in some form of cryptocurrency because it's untraceable. Any type of form that you might work with IMG on, your full-blown cyber policies are going to pick up a cryptocurrency, most of those payments being in Bitcoin. So yes, you do want to make sure that the form that you might currently have or one that you're looking at is going to pick up cryptocurrency in the definition of monies.
We'll grab one more here before we close up. From your standpoint, what do you need to quote a cyber policy, Nick?
Yeah, so right now, it's still pretty simple. I really just need first the name of the account, revenue, address, and a URL if we have one. Myself and IMG, we've created a short little one-page application that can get the process started. Again, I do think now's the time to buy. And if you are waiting, you're opening yourself up, I think, for a can of worms. And price-wise, you're not going to get it at a better price than you do now. So again, you can send that information over to IMG if we can get name, address, revenue, or reach out to James or Trent and they can send you over the correct application.
Yeah, thanks, Nick. And I would reiterate, like Nick spoke about earlier, that one-page app, and Nick, being a broker, actually has access to most, if not all, of the top carriers when it comes to cyber liability. The thing we run into when we're meeting with clients and prospects is a lot of people they think they have sufficient cyber limits, a sufficient cyber policy, and most of the time we see these are just endorsements to the GL policy. And Nick, you spoke a little bit to this, but those are so limited, it's just almost laughable. These property and casualty standard carriers are just throwing a liability limit on there or some limits on there just to give you a little bit of a throw in. But number one, they don't have the capabilities to handle these claims. They're not set up for it. And they're really just trying to make that policy look a little better. I'm not saying you're not getting anything, but as far as what the exposures are and what's out there, it's very limited. And I would say, hopefully it's us here at IMG, but at the end of the day, the best thing you can do, fill out that one-page app. We get you some quotes. We can look at your current policy that you have, just to kind of run through it and see maybe what you're missing or what we would recommend that we can do for you. It's a simple process. There's nothing you have to do other than that. Like I said, that simple one-page app. But the exposures aren't going away. It's getting tougher. Again, we'd love to be your broker and take a look at it for you. And feel free, our emails are on the screen right here. If you have any questions or comments or would like us to look at anything for you, feel free to reach out. Thank you, Nick. We appreciate the time. And thank you all you out there for taking a few minutes out of your day-to-day to sit in and listen to this. And hopefully you were able to learn some things. So look forward to talking with you guys and appreciate the time.